Welcome back to Screen Preach, episode 65. Welcome back to Screen Preach for episode 65. We're back, another week, 65. We're already 15 episodes in. Yeah, 15 episodes in to the second season of Screen Preach. And we will talk about cinema and television and, the arts, culture, in the name of the Godfather, the Son of Odin, and the Holy Jedi. And so what's going on, everybody? How we doing? Glad to be here. Really glad to be into a movie this week, too, that I watched. Finally got around to it. I put it up, all the movies I'm going to try to get to. Some of it's been out, some of it's coming out. But, I finally watched Minari, and that's what we're going to talk about, because I had to get around to it. It was one of the ones, of all the Oscar ones on there, obviously there was the ones that I already saw and talked about forever ago, like the Trial of the Chicago 7 I watched when it came out, and then you had the stuff that I didn't watch until later, like Nomadland or Promising Young Woman. This is, this was on my list a while ago, and so we're finally here. But, I was just, because I was kind of debating what I should do this week. I was thinking about just going to the theater and checking out Snake Eyes like everybody else would be doing. Snake Eyes, I will get to it when it comes out later, and I can, watch it at home. I decided that I don't care to, it's not something I'm going to go pay a ticket for. Because it's not something I was crazy about seeing, and it doesn't look like it's that good a movie anyway, and at least from what I've heard from other people, but not going to spend a ticket on it. I will wait, and I will talk about that film later on. It's such a pet peeve of mine if I'm looking at the camera and it's not fucking whatever. What's going on? Interesting week. Some stuff happened. Just to give an update on some things. I don't know. There isn't anything. I'm still watching the same stuff. Although you know what? I checked out Masters of the Universe, and it's okay. I'll watch it too. I only watched the first episode, but I will watch it anyway. Because the first episode does kind of leave you with an interesting little cliffhanger-y kind of feel to it. It's okay, I'm a little bit intrigued to see what happens, but it's not amazing or anything, as it probably should be. But there's that. There's the fact that when I go to every time I go to the gym to work out, for some reason the middle screen, there's 3 screens. The middle screen is on this literal Walking Dead channel. There's a Walking Dead channel now. It's called the Walking Dead Universe, basically. It's all Walking Dead stuff. And so they've been replaying The Walking Dead. They play Fear the Walking Dead. They play any show connected to anything Walking Dead, and the actors, and it makes me want to, because I stopped at I finished season 8 of The Walking Dead. So I saw how the war between our people, Rick and our people, and Negan's people, I saw how that came to a conclusion-ish. That war. I've been all of a sudden a little bit intrigued to see what happens, because I already know about the whole Rick thing. I don't know what happens, but I know that he only is in the first 4 episodes, season 9, and then the protagonist kind of switches over to Daryl to finish this out. They're this 11th and final season of that series starts. I thought it already started, but it didn't. It starts in August, and I'm a little bit intrigued just to kind of. I was always gonna just watch the last 4 of Rick's arc, and that was it, be done, because I don't care after that, because it's kind of weird to me that the protagonist could die or whatever happens to him, and they keep going. I'd rather it have concluded in a way where Rick's arc concludes when the actual series arc concludes. But there's been a lot. That's just, hey, just to add, let's pile on top of the already, many writing problems, whether it's structurally or whatever, with that series that has been slowly just getting kind of worse ever since season 4 and on. But I'm still, for some reason, intrigued to I'm thinking about just finishing it in its entirety and doing the whole 11. So there's that. I've been thinking about starting that up and picking up where I left off. That's the only thing, really. Yeah, they were playing some of those early episodes. That was quality TV for a little bit there. And it's something just didn't hold up there. But, yeah. Anyway, The Boys is my favorite thing that I'm watching besides Attack on Titan, Invincible, which that was quick. Season 1's quick. That's done. Like, I'm waiting for season 2 of that for sure. And you know what? Titans, I kind of like it. I do. I know the 3rd season starts up too. So I'm going to be caught up soon. I don't know. That's it, really. I'm just kind of watching all the same stuff. I don't know. What else? Is there anything, really? I guess my update on Dave, since I've been watching it now since season 2 came back, and I've been weekly on that. Season 2 has not been exactly what I expected it to be. It's not as Davey as the first season, in my opinion. It's been a little bit, I guess I'll say, I guess it's been worse, actually. Doesn't mean I'm not enjoying it, but it's just kind of not what I expected. And there's only like a couple episodes left in the season. But I get it. It turned into a bit of a character piece this season 2, and it's like very much getting into the psyche of Dave and like all of his very like even like a lot of like origin stuff and like like his background and his family stuff, and like it's a little, the vibe is different this season, but it's more dramatic and less comedy, which is not necessarily bad, but it's just that it doesn't have that balance that the first season had. The first season had dramatic, very deep moments, but also a lot of good comedic moments, and this season's kind of been less comedic. I think this show is great when it's doing when it's following the motor of this. There's a motor to every series that certain kinds of stories that inhabit every episode. Like it needs to kind of get back to that season 1 balance, that season 1 motor a little bit. We'll see what happens as this season ends, and if they do a 3rd, we'll see. What else? Anything? I guess that's it. Kind of always feel like there was a Shang-Chi poster that dropped today. Not today for you, of course. Oh yeah, and then I should just let you know ahead of time that there will be weeks off. There will be weeks with no Screen Preach episodes because Benji needs a vacation, because I'm entitled to one. So just keep that in mind. And and as for what I'm planning on doing with the show going forward, I will definitely continue as it is all the way till 100 every week, something else. After that, I think I'm very much just going to do what I said originally. Not just stop altogether, but only do episodes when I feel it, and when it's movies I really want to talk about it. And other than that, it's going to be me keeping up with things, the news, and all that stuff on Instagram. Everything will kind of stay the same, if not. There will be more going. That page will be constantly. That's not going to end in any way. That's going to just pick up speed. But this format will shift a little bit. That's it. So we can move on to the news of this week, which had some. We have to talk about some stuff here a little bit. And I'll start with this very, this whole big thing, with Scarlett Johansson and so that's the top story. Yeah, top story this week is that Scarlett Johansson is suing Disney for breach of contract by doing a Disney Plus release the way that it did. So much to unpack here, and so much I still don't actually know. Okay? Now, mind you, some of the stuff I don't know may have been said, and that's poor on my part for not reading up on it more. Okay? My bad. But until I really do, I'm just going to give you my initial reaction to this. There's two sides here. One, Scarlett Johansson is in the wrong. Or two, Disney's in the wrong. No shit, dude. But it's just that until I know really, if it's a matter of being underpaid, that's the big thing here. If it's a matter of being underpaid. Because there's no reason for that at all. Scarlett Johansson should be paid the same that any other leading actor in any Marvel movie is getting paid. If anything, she should be getting paid the most money of any actor other than Downey Jr., who is obviously, for obvious reasons, just because it's Downey Jr. and Iron Man. But Black Widow has been the glue character of this whole narrative since Iron Man 2, and just going forward. Like, she's been vital to the whole story, and that's just coming from an artistic standpoint. In terms of business and everything, that's the thing. There's no reason to not pay your actors. So if that's what it is, obviously. But here's the thing: it seems that Scarlett Johansson's side is framing it as there being a lack of female representation or something, or there needing to be a reframe of female representation. That's weird to me in terms of this movie. It's because, the breach of contract here is that there's a release pattern that was not in the contract, therefore maybe some of her revenue is not being pulled in or paid to her from the Disney Plus release side of things. She was only paid from the regular box office, and maybe there was some kind of deal in her contract. I don't know, see. But then I read that it has something about being misrepresented or being mistreated. There's a whole gender thing here going on. It seems weird for that to happen now when her solo movie just came out. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. Because it's Black Widow that just came out. It's Black Widow, the movie about Black Widow. You're the star of the movie. It almost seems like framing it, this whole thing almost should have happened years ago when she didn't have a movie yet, and maybe she wasn't being paid as much and all that. Again, it comes down really to payment representation. That's not to say that there still needs to be more, doesn't still need to be more progress in terms of representation for women. Of course there does. It's just that I don't see that being an issue here in this case in terms of how the movie was released and everything like that. So I don't know what that's about. But if Scarlett Johansson's just being a cuck, then she's being a cuck. Or if it's if it's just a recurring corporate problem in this fucking business, in this industry, and in this country, that is also very likely. But I hope this gets resolved, because it is rough to see something like this happen. So there's that update. I don't know, and it's very disheartening to see anything like this, really. It really is. But why, dude? I did not, bro. Are you fucking kidding me right now? What the fuck was that, man? It's like it just pulled up a movie out of nowhere. I did not. I did not pull up a movie. I did not press anything. I didn't hit anything. Don't. It just fuck off, okay, computer, with your bullshit. Do I hear it? Is it playing still? Moving on. God. Annoying bullshit. J.K. Simmons in talks to play Commissioner Gordon again in the Batgirl movie. Okay, we talked about this last week. Where does this movie fit in the whole jumbled DC universe? If Commissioner Gordon from Batman vs Superman is in Batgirl, then Batgirl is in that universe in that arc with Wonder Woman and Flash and all that. That's where that Batgirl movie takes place. It's not individual like I wanted it to be, basically. So that sucks. Although it doesn't really matter, and it could just still be good. It's like, whatever, doesn't matter. You know what's been cracking me up lately, and without pointing names or naming fingers, is when we have some of these diehard DC fans who have the nerve to crap on Star Wars. You're a DC fan, and so that's just, you're a DC fan they've put out garbage after garbage. They've been known for it. Okay, so yeah, that's fine, dude. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, and I know they've put out crap, but I'm not over here fucking shitting all over DC. Vice versa, that shit. Alright? You can be a fan of your shit. We're a fan of ours over here in a galaxy far, far away. We'll just leave each other alone. Because you can't really talk, dude, is my point. Because Star Wars has put out good shit, and so has DC. So it goes both ways here. Whatever the fuck's going on with Batgirl. Then again, it all could come down to the whole multiverse thing they're doing. Again. Yeah. But the real... I should admit, this should be the news segment, right? The big thing was they finally released... There's a release date for Hawkeye. We've been wondering what's the next thing after Shang-Chi. We knew it was either Hawkeye or Miss Marvel, and we're still wondering if they're going to do this back-to-back thing or what was it. But it doesn't matter. We have November 24th for Hawkeye, and they could still back-to-back it. But like I said, more likely Miss Marvel rolls over into 2022. It's not a 2021 release. That's what it's looking like. I would think Miss Marvel would be a January or February release. But Hawkeye is 100% November 24th. Can't wait. Kind of a longer wait than I wanted. Because think about it, right? You got What If next month. And we're already waiting right now. There's nothing. I'm just thinking about it in terms of what Feige said earlier in the year. He was like, there will be Marvel content pretty much every week this year. You lied. That's not the case. You lied. Because I've been waiting since Loki ended. So there's been nothing weeks here. Okay? So, yeah, that's kind of a longer wait than I wanted, but whatever. I mean, What If, Shang-Chi, and Shang-Chi's only 1 week, right? You go see it, and that's it. And that's September, so all of September, or half of September, all of October, actually, and all of November. November 24th. What the fuck, dude? You really lied, man. Why am I waiting this long for Hawkeye? Whatever. At least there's a release date for it. They put out a couple of little photos too for it, so that's cool. Just drop the trailer though. Just that's really what we need to drop the trailer for this. If it comes out in November, should it be out already? And we're in July here. We're in August. We're in August when this comes out. This episode of Screen Preach comes out on August 2nd. Is today August 2nd? Future people. Is today August 2nd? Moving on. We got Green Book screenwriter Nick Vallelonga penning a sequel to HBO's 1996 Gotti. I just saw that and it looked interesting because I'm a big crime fan, and the Gotti movie on HBO was in many ways better than the Travolta piece of shit that came out. So if anything, if any one of those is gonna get a sequel, yeah. Just interesting to think about. Maybe it might actually be like really good too. It might actually be really good. HBO Max, by the way, they're just at the top of their fucking. They're the best in my opinion, streaming service. And they just came out last year. Like they just revamped everything last year, and they're the best. They have everything, dude. Disney Plus is second for me because of Marvel and Star Wars. But if it wasn't for, I mean, what would they, dude? You can't beat HBO Max. Netflix isn't even beating HBO Max for me. It's just got it's really something. James Gunn says he's talked to Marvel and DC about a Harley Quinn and Groot spin-off movie. That's not gonna happen, dude. If it does, it's because of multiverse shit, and then it's like, Jesus, well, we might as well just have the Justice League and the Avengers fucking in a movie together, and then it might be stupid. And then, whatever, I don't know, maybe not. I can't say. Pretty soon, I'm not going to be able to keep up. I'm going to be like Tarantino. Tarantino was like, this comic book shit, what Marvel's doing now would have been great when I was in my 20s. Now I'm 50. I'm in my 50s and I don't give a shit. He said that. That's going to be me one day. It'll be like, they're going to be still doing this when I'm in my 50s and I won't be keeping up anymore. It'll be like, I'll be like the grumpy old Star Wars fan who's like, the original trilogy, there's been nothing. That's going to be me. I'm like, oh, well, we had that. We had the Infinity Saga, dude. And we had the multiversal saga, whatever the fuck they're going to call this one. Because this one's still going to be quality. But then it's going to be like, well, they're in the Dark Age saga, whatever the fuck. I don't know. And it's like, who's in it? And what and who? See how long they can keep this train going. I don't know. It's hard to say. Will I still be a huge fan? I don't know. Probably, maybe. I don't know. Everybody changes too over time. Who knows what you hang on to and what you don't? I just know that I'm a fucking big time nerd now. Batman Unburied. Oh yeah, Winston Duke is gonna voice Bruce Wayne in this Batman Unburied animated movie, is it? Interesting. Just thought that was interesting. Lucasfilm's ILM hires the YouTuber who did a better job than they did at a CGI Luke Skywalker for The Mandalorian. Do you remember that? There was a video on YouTube after The Mandalorian finale, and this YouTuber, did a better job than Disney at making an accurate-looking CGI, the young version of Luke. And it was better. And they hired that kid. That's great, dude. That's awesome. Are you kidding me? They kept their eyes peeled for the talent that was clearly this person, and yeah, fuck it, and they hired him. I mean, that makes. You know what? I wonder if it's also a hint of things. Could it be hinting at things? Could this kid have been hired because Luke Skywalker is actually going to be a character in storylines going forward? Again? That's something to think about. I mean, what if they... Who knows, man? I like what Lucasfilm is doing with Legends Media. So it's like, how Marvel pulls from comic books and adapts. It seems that Lucasfilm also kind of does something similar. They will pull from a lot of Legends media and adapt it and make a version of, kind of. That's cool to think about. It's like they have a source material all of a sudden to pull from. And not that they kind of always do, really, though, if you're thinking about the original films, as anything George Lucas did is the source material, right? But then also all these Legends writers and what they created can be considered source material too if they want to pull from it. That's cool. I like that. I mean, you just got to go ahead and look at the sequel trilogy and see the similarities between those films and some of the Legends storylines. So that's how I know I'm right when I say that, okay? To an extent and everything, whatever. Universal pays $400 million for its new Exorcist trilogy. I posted about this earlier in the week, but it's very interesting to think about how much money they have spent on it. And that seems to be a thing going around lately. That's like, I mean, Netflix did the whole $450 million purchase for the Knives Out franchise with Rian Johnson. And then we got this at Universal. I was just curious if it's going to be quality, effective. I would like to see something closer to the original almost. But obviously with today's technology and it's more contemporary version of it. But like, something just in better quality if they're doing something. Exorcist, that was interesting enough news to talk about. But that is our news this week, and I did do a pretty good, I paced my way through it there, and it's because I do want to get to our topic this week. So let's get to it. Yeah. And our film this week is Minari, which I didn't know what it meant, but this film explains it, obviously. But it's just such a metaphor for the whole thing, the title, which I'll get into here. I gotta say that it surprised me at how much it really made me like feel, but more than that, any movie that makes you really think about it like this, it's the best. It's the best. And I mean, I'm always immediately more engaged with a story when it can open a certain way too. And the opening of this, especially when it manages to reveal many details in a short amount of time and do it visually and do it quickly and do it like effectively, those are the best openings. And I think this opening does that very well. Does it visually for a few minutes, then it uses some dialogue, the whole kind of opening sequence. But it sets up everything very subtly almost, and then I'm involved, like in a very, very good way. It's almost mesmerizing, and that's a good thing. But one of my favorite writing moments in the movie is the chicken metaphor in the beginning. And now I'm thinking about it too in terms of Jacob's character, Jacob Yee, played marvelously by Stephen Young. Okay, the performances, I'll just say right away that they really just made this whole thing, right? Because every character is so engaging, is so real and human, just very powerful moments, very poignant, very nuanced, and I think that it summed up his character, that metaphor, and the whole kind of his whole motivation, his whole drive, and any conflict that he brings upon himself or that is brought upon him by exterior forces, kind of all comes around to his actions and how he proceeds to go about things. But that metaphor, yeah, it's this idea about, what does he say there in the beginning? He says, the males are useless. And then he's talking to his son. He says, so therefore we have to find a way to make ourselves useful. He says. I mean, that's just like, it's almost it's almost true of men and women in general, man. I mean, it's like reproduction, dude. Like, the women do everything, man. We just kind of we made ourselves useful for for a second, and then it's all on them, on the women, and it's kind of true in a way that we have to find ways to then. It's very old. There's a whole cultural element to this film, obviously, but it's very old school, like, mentality of, like, the man provides, right? The man must do whatever to make himself useful, to provide, to succeed, right? In service of the family. And then the main question of this whole story is this idea of, like, well, is he putting his family first, or is he allowing this pursuit to get in the way of family and destroy it? That's kind of always been a recurring question of stories. But yeah, that was really great. And then it's just, I'm hooked into anything that's that with a story about family or hard work, or this idea of the American dream, and that's what it is too. At its core, it's base. It's a story about the base level American dream being played out. Right? It's like farming. Like, it's so base level American, like hard work. Like we can succeed here, and I can provide for my family, and we can thrive. And it's like harvesting. The idea of farming is the action of farming is there's a lot of thematic resonance there, because it's like you're growing things to provide things. Yeah, it's very much like how family functions in general, which is what I kept coming around to too. Is like this idea of the Minari too, and like the way it grows, and the family. You see, I'm just thinking about it still, because that's what that was one of the best things here, is that you have something truly thought provoking like this. That's the best kind of movie, because I'm constantly thinking about it. I'm constantly, like, trying to like, sometimes moments that are really resonating with me. Why are they resonating with me? And maybe what are the thematic, what's the thematic meaning behind something, or the decisions that the director made, and that's, that's important for making something truly personal like this, because it's very personal to the filmmakers. It's personal to the audience, because it's so relevant and relatable and resonant. So I think, yeah, you want to be thinking about it. You want to be feeling the moments that pass, and here you have you have an American family. This whole idea about the American dream. You have an American family, Korean American, which also comes into play in terms of, like, style and, like I said, cultural nuance, and their very basic want of, like, wanting to have this, like, Korean farm in America kind of, like, it's very come to America, and the American dream is there waiting for you, but then it's not. You realize it's a lie, because it always is, and you have to take it if you want it. And, like, that's always been that's a old school theme of stories. Yeah, it's always it's just like the American dream has it's a lie, but it's just achieving your dreams is supposed to be easier here more than anywhere else in the world. But it's not, and then it's definitely not for certain groups of people, which I thought they were going to touch on, but they didn't as much, which I'll get into that too. I appreciated that as well, because it seems like every movie today is about some social issue, and the story's trying to enlighten us in some way. Which we need those kind of stories, but we also just need something like this, man, where it does kind of make you think about that, but so subtly that it's not, you don't even, doesn't matter. It's like, because it's not a story about that. It's about humanity, really, is what it's about. I really saw it as, like, as I'm going through, I'm thinking they're setting up everything that's going to be a conflict going forward in the movie. I'm thinking to myself, okay, they are introduced the son's health issues, their financial issues, and then them being kind of outsiders. I thought all of those things would kind of come around and be moments of conflict throughout, but instead they didn't. Almost brilliantly, it doesn't end up being that way. It's that all those things are what they overcome, actually, by the end. Without it being blatant, like, plot points with conflict. It's not like they had a big moment where the son, like, was fucked up and, like, because they introduced his problem, and then all of a sudden there's a moment where there's like a big plot point with that at the center of it. No, that didn't happen. Instead, it was the grandmother who had a health problem, and then their the house being not this. They introduced the house as being not this marvelous thing. I was thinking, okay, well then there's going to be house problems, but no, it wasn't house problems. It all ended up coming back around to water. Actually, water was the main source of conflict for a lot of the story here. Was not having water and not having enough water. And that also, I guess, does tie into financial, because they couldn't pay for water. But also the conflict of family conflict and relationships, and that really is embodied by Jacob and Monica Yee, husband and wife, right? So what they're going through together, and how they're supposed to get through things together, but instead they kind of they don't solve the problems. They just kind of run away from the problems in their own way and don't deal with it as a good partnership. But instead they don't get each other through. They get through on their own almost. But then that's the facade of it all, because in actuality they all get through it in their own way, but together was kind of what the story ended up being. It's that when they're together, they're able to get through it in their own ways, kind of something like that. It's very, 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 like I said, nuanced, but like there's a lot of depth to it. So I'm able to keep thinking about it, and I'll keep thinking about it. Very thought-provoking, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can interpret certain moments in this. But there's also this idea of being American versus being Korean, which they kind of, this idea of just not being kind of both, but almost as two different things, because they are from Korea originally, so all of their cultural, being is, they just brought it with them to America. It doesn't just make, they're just not all of a sudden gonna switch to some way of living. They're going to incorporate it into this new way of living, and it be kind of a cohesive thing here. But instead, what we have is, it's kind of like this clashing thing here, because I think Jacob is kind of a representation of everything, like, about like what it means to be a Korean American, or trying to just be American, while Monica is representing this idea of just being Korean, almost in a way, and everything from family values, traditions that she practices, her mother being the one who comes and lives with them, and some of her dialogue, even some of the things that she says. Like, there's this moment where she says, like, David or the mother asks, I hear American kids don't like to share their room, and she says, well, you don't have to worry. He's not like that because he's not like that. He's a Korean kid, like almost like trying to just be Korean and not Korean American was this thing, and it's kind of like a symbolic embodiment of what most of Jacob and Monica's conflicts together are about. Is that they're kind of pushing each other in opposite directions that they want to go, trying to be thing. They're both trying to be something different almost. And then in the end, it almost is like this idea of American and Korean coming together, really. The two of them really embracing that whole idea, and then it really is like they are just an American family in Arkansas doing their thing, and getting through the problems together. The whole film has many beautiful moments, but more so, the beautiful embedded themes and subtext that really make it great. Even the title Minari. So, like, I'm thinking about the title a lot, which I didn't know was just water celery, right? Minari's water celery grows in, like, water, basically. I guess it's common in some Eastern countries. And it really acts as a metaphor for the whole story, like the grandmother wanting to grow it there, right? And then the fact that water is the main source of the conflict for the story, and this idea that the family itself is like Minari. I think that's what I kept thinking about too. Minari, they're like Minari that is struggling to grow without water. You see what I mean? Like they almost like the whole water. So for them, they don't have water. So they can't grow properly, kind of thing, or get through or overcome. And of course, the creek where the Minari is growing was at times throughout the film used to help with their water problem. Like they would lug buckets of that water back to the house. So that whole thing with the Minari was intentional, 100%. And I just want to point out that it is refreshing, like I said, to have a very human story here. And by that I mean it is not embedded with political or social undertones. There's an undertone of spirituality, 100%, like religion. And that almost allowed it to exist outside of any political or social agenda. It's trying to imply without addressing directly the beauty of humanity. So like race and religion and sexual orientation, all that stuff doesn't matter. Here it's represented in race and creed, but this idea of Korean church versus regular church was a thing. And at the end of the day, there's just God, and then there's we, the people. Like there's just, we are a people. We are all a people, all one people. It's about human beings, not, those people and these people. No, just people, like just American people, and that's it. Like dealing with struggles and getting through it together. And I really, really appreciated that. I really felt that. We need, like I said, we need stories like this. There can't be some very obvious fucking just agenda thrown in there, and it's like, okay, yes, 100%, this is important. But it's almost more effective to just tell a story about people in a situation, and when you do it like that, it's like obvious that we're all one people, man. That's what I love about this movie. And then it's just so heartwarming, the whole family element, and that line at the end really sums up the whole thing in a way. He said what, like Jacob sees the Minari and he says it grows just fine on its own. that's kind of like a way of saying the family grew just fine on its own too when it was together, when it stayed together. Like the Minari and the water needing to be together, needing to stay together in order to grow. That was them. You couldn't have one without the other. Huh, yeah. I don't know. It's like I said, it's that kind of movie where you're gonna feel it really deeply, and then you're going to be thinking about it, and so this is just a basic, just initial reaction to it because I just watched it, but I thought it touched me, and at its core, it's really just a beautiful little movie, and so my rating of it is probably high 8s, so yeah, because it was very masterful. 8.8 out of 10. Great movie. Must watch. Everybody, you gotta check this out. Especially if you just like a real human movie, like a real personal human story, just a regular movie. Sometimes they're just the best kinds. And that's it. That's where we're at here for episode 65. 11 o'clock. Okay, 11. Okay. I always seem to be a little ahead on Friday the last few weeks, but I still don't get to the recording until like 10. I don't know how that happens. Well, let's move on. Let's finish this episode up. It's a good one. So we'll do our next episode of Behind the Camera. And this movie, of course, was an Oscar nominee. And so it made me think of other Oscar nominees. And then this is a story of Korean Americans. And so I thought of another Oscar film that was about Koreans. And then I had to just go and look and see what went into the making of this next one on our next episode of Behind the Camera, because this film was a fucking masterpiece, and this one I gotta deep dive into it a little bit. So for our next episode, let's talk about Parasite. The 2019 masterpiece Parasite, which shook the world, was almost masterful in another medium. It was originally conceived as a play with just 2 locations, the Kim apartment and Park's household. The idea came initially from Bong Joon-ho's own experiences growing up and working as a tutor in his early 20s. And I'm going to do it again. I'm going to start that again because I fucking said his name wrong. Like, seriously? I know his name. I know how to say it, and I still did my stupid little stutter. So I'm going to do it. I'm fucking doing it again. And it pisses me off. The 2019 masterpiece Parasite, which took... The 2019 masterpiece Parasite, which shook the world, was almost masterful in another medium. It was originally conceived as a play with just 2 locations, the Kim apartment and Park's household. The idea came initially from Bong Joon-ho's own experiences growing up and working as a tutor in his early 20s. And in talking about the writing process, as we do on Screen Preach, for Joon-ho, he describes his process for this film as being a 4-year battle conceptualizing the idea, but a 4-month creative hurricane for actually writing the script once the midpoint twist finally came to mind. And in terms of set design and bringing Joon-ho's vision to life, there is nothing more interesting than how the third act apartment flooding sequence came to be. The crew actually built the set in a giant water tank in order to more easily flood the space. Now that is world building. And did you know that, like other directors, Bong Joon-ho has since said that he is not entirely happy with the final cut of the film. He says that rewatching it now, he can see a bunch of things he would have done, quote unquote, better. But this is nothing new. Many great artists are their own worst critics. How can there really be anything too wrong with such a marvelous masterpiece, though?
혹시라도 이걸 쓸 찬스가 있으면 대박이긴 한데.
Okay, so, we're 50 minutes in. We're going to wrap this up. Our poll this week, our question this week. So last week I asked what's the best... last week I did a versus, right? Inception versus Interstellar. I thought there would be more debate on that. I don't know. People just kept saying those are both great films. Both of them are great. No shit, I asked you to pick one. I know it's hard. That's the point. You're going to love this week. This is even harder. This might be the hardest one I've ever asked. So, I ask you this. Of the only 4 actors to ever win Oscars for playing the same character, which performance is the best? And I am, of course, talking about the characters of Vito Corleone from The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2, and the Joker from The Dark Knight and Joker. Who had the best performance? Marlon Brando, Robert De Niro, Heath Ledger, or Joaquin Phoenix? Who had the best? That's a great one. And, I mean, that's really hard for me to pick. I'm only picking Marlon Brando because that movie, to me, is the greatest film ever made. Therefore, I have to pick Marlon Brando's performance because it did make a lot of what that movie was. But I understand everyone picking Heath Ledger because The Dark Knight is a masterpiece too, but best movie ever made? Best performance? It's so hard. That's the point, okay? That's the point. I don't see people picking De Niro's version or Joaquin's version, but you never know. Of all 4 of those, any one of them could be. So that's a good one. I like that one. And then my recommendations, I'm going to do a little different. Why not switch it up? So this week I'm just going to recommend 3 just a couple of other really great films that are just, like, very, just dramas. Maybe from the last 3 Oscars. Yeah. So, Jojo Rabbit is still something I always recommend to people. Green Book, another one, and then 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. 3 movies that if you have not seen, you definitely need to. You're doing yourself a disservice if you don't. So 100%, those 3. I won't give you a book, a game, or a TV show recommendation this week. We'll just go with that. And that's it, man. That's it for that. I keep saying that's it. Let's just keep doing there's another one. We got our next episode of The Draft this week. And this week, I'm going to talk a little bit about outlining and what I do after I finish research. So I've done all my research, and I talked a little bit about character last week because that's kind of how I go into things next. And going off of what I said last week, right? This idea of letting your characters kind of talk to you, right? And just kind of tell you maybe a little bit where they would go instead of you trying to steer them in a certain direction. that is something that it could just be an exercise, like I said. But so here's a good place to maybe allow for that to happen. I would always just kind of break down every character. That's what I do. And so if I have a protagonist, which you need, but also sometimes it could be multi-perspective. The one I'm working on now, I'm still figuring that out a little bit. It's multi-perspective. Lately, I've been thinking it needs to be kind of like the protagonist needs to be the place, and that can help make it multi-perspective. That's what I've been thinking about lately. Not a specific person, but the place itself. Maybe that's the protagonist, and that's how I can make it kind of flow better in my head as to how I approach the characters here. But that's what I do. I coming up with characters is like, it's like exactly how it sounds. You give them a name, and it should come to you in an interesting kind of almost natural way. I always kind of will name my characters very specifically, almost like thematically, in like, in a symbolic way that represents the story. I name the main characters. For instance, one of the characters here is Quaid. His name is Quaid, and he has no last name, and that is 100% due to the kind of character he is in this story. He's somebody who's hiding from people, so he like created a new identity, but he didn't give himself a last name. And then there's Western undertones to this story, and I figure like it's very like John Wayne, like kind of like or this idea of like Eastwood's characters always kind of had one name like that. There's that kind of so what you name them, hundreds. Every decision that you make writing is important. Like everything should be intentional. Every little detail should be intentional. And I even think that when I'm naming my characters. So like, obviously this is a gangster Western kind of film here that I'm working on. So like, his full name and his real name we get to learn. It's some long Italian name, but he's just Quaid. He's the hero of this story, and his name's Quaid, and that's all we need. And that was intentional. So you should think that way. And then I break down everything about this character, his backstory, what happens the backstory is important, but it's not so important that you should flesh it out into don't fucking create like a fucking profile, like with all the little pointless details. Just basically like you're telling a little story of what happened to this person throughout his life. There's everything that happened before the movie started, and then there's everything that happens during the course of the movie. And that is the movie, kind of. When I'm breaking down what the characters do in the context of the 2-hour movie, that part of their life is the movie. That part of the life when I'm writing out all that stuff that happens, that's where I pull scenes from. That's where you start to think of, that's where scenes come from the movie. And it's for every character. You'll have a scene from another point of view. The movie's probably in terms of point of view is important. Probably going to be in the main character's point of view for most of the movie, but you'll have point of view scenes from other characters. When I'm writing out what happens to other characters in the movie, that's always interesting because a lot of that stuff doesn't even end up in the movie, but I'll underline like potential scenes, and then there could be a scene there. So that's kind of just where I go after research. I start with character, and plot comes from character for me, more so than the other way around. It can happen the other way around, but I've just never gone that way. And so lately too, I've been thinking when I do that step in the process, that's where I want to kind of let the characters tell me what's going on more than I have in the past. That's something I'm going to change going forward. But I'll keep going on this in future episodes of the draft. So I hope you liked this one. I'm not going to just do everything. I'm not going to do everything. That's where we are here now in this one. Character's important. It's probably the most important thing. I think it's more important than plot. I think character's more important than plot 100%. But I don't know. I guess it's debatable. I don't know. nothing caught my attention this week. We can wrap this up. Shout out to the patrons. Patrons are as follows and are as usual because nobody else is around to throw $5 a month. $5 a month is all it takes to be a patron and get a shout out and get free merch and all that stuff. $5 a month is all it takes. $5 a month, which you can scrape up literally $1.25 a week. And that's $5 a month. But Billy Thomas does it, and Jessica Murphy does it, and Michael Morganti does it, and Linda Morganti does it, and Doolin Morganti does it, and Tishan Construction does it, and Doolin, you don't do it. I throw your name in here. You don't throw 5. But go follow Tijan Construction. If you're looking to do renovations, if you're looking to Tijan Construction's your people. If you're in New York, you're New York based, Putnam County, Westchester County, anything like that. You're looking to work on your house or something, Tijan Construction. They're a friend of the show. They're a patron. So you can be too by becoming a patron at patreon.com/preacher. You can follow me if you want at the Benji. You need to go follow the show, right? You can follow the show at Screen Preach. And then for this episode and weekly episodes and other content from creator, screenwriter Ben Morganti, that's me, just referred to myself in the third person. Subscribe to BMS Studios on YouTube. And visit my website at benmorgantistory.com because that's where my other projects are. And probably need to rebrand that whole website and redo and everything. But I'll get to it. I'll get to it. But as usual, for those who do always tune in, I really appreciate it. And yeah, so if you're really if you're a weekly watcher or a weekly listener, don't feel too bad when I'm not around for a few weeks or whatever, because I need a vacation. I need a break. Yesterday I worked from 9 to 9:30 at night, so that's a 12.5-hour day, and I still came home and wrote. So what do you think? Do you think it's okay if I take a break? Donut does. She just wagged her tail a little bit. I don't know why that made her do that, but I agree. Thanks for watching or listening, and have a cinematic week.